Yes, welcome everybody. My name is Tammy Flood, and I'm here today sharing with you our research completed as part of my undergraduate thesis at Brock University. And I am coming to you today from a very, very muggy North Bay. So here is a quick snapshot of what my presentation is going to look like today. I'll start off with giving a bit of a background on the research. I will talk about the purpose of our research, and then I'll touch on the theoretical framework and methodology. And then I'll go into the findings and have a brief discussion, and then discuss some implications and areas for future research. So parks and recreation services do provide many benefits to communities, including improved health outcomes and better quality of life. So in rural communities in Canada, recreation services can play an even more significant role, as they may be one of the few opportunities for community members to come together and engage in social, physical, and cultural activities. And these services are primarily the responsibility of municipalities in Ontario. However, there is a complex relationship between the province and municipalities regarding the coordination of services, and many municipalities are faced with providing these services with really scarce resources to do so. And little research has focused on the role of municipalities in Ontario in the delivery of recreation services and programming, and even less has focused on rural and northern communities. So rural municipalities are really important subjects of examination, and particularly in the north, such as those in Northern Ontario. As previous research suggests, really the significance of differentiating between the requirements of urban centers, rural municipalities, and northern communities. So due to the crucial role municipal recreation services do play in the quality of life for citizens in rural and northern communities, it's really important for the province and municipalities and parks and recreation practitioners to understand factors influencing recreation service delivery and its relevant policies. So the role of municipal recreation organizations is to provide and maintain facilities and to manage recreation programs. Recreation programs are often delivered through either direct planning or a community development approach. Some scholars would argue that municipalities' main role in recreation is the provision of facilities. So notably, according to recent infrastructure reports, small rural municipalities account for a more significant share of new facilities in Canada. In 2020, 1/5 of publicly owned culture, recreation, and sport facilities were owned by rural municipalities with less than 5,000 residents, where 6% of the Canadian population lives. And although the Municipal Act in Ontario does not mandate policies related to parks and recreation, to guide decision-making in recreation service delivery, municipalities do have the authority to pass resolutions, policies, or bylaws such as service fee policies. So for a little bit of background on the research, previous research does suggest, and scholars have argued, that municipalities have shifted to a neoliberal approach for operations, including for recreation services, due in part to provincial policy changes characterized by marketization and managerialism that have resulted in downloading responsibilities to municipalities without the additional revenue to support them. So meaning municipalities, especially rural ones, are in a really tough spot to provide these services with limited revenue available. And further, community development scholars have identified that governments portray that they are using community development principles, such as inclusion, participation, and empowerment. However, in reality, they appear to divert the responsibility from the government to local organizations. Overall, the literature does suggest that municipal recreation faces multiple values and beliefs, and that rural communities in Ontario face challenges when delivering municipal services. So with all of this in mind, our purpose was to examine factors that underpin policy related to recreation service delivery in the context of Northeastern Ontario. Our aim was to provide insight into the ideas, assumptions, and beliefs that influence policy related to recreation services, and how they shape taken for granted actions of municipal recreation organizations. So we used institutional theory and the concepts of organizational fields, logics, and legitimacy to explore the following research questions. What are the institutional logics that underpin policymakers' decision-making around municipal recreation service delivery in the Cochrane and Timiskaming districts? And how do these logics impact the perceived legitimacy within municipal recreation organizations in these areas? So institutional theory is a sociological perspective that examines how organizations and society shape and are shaped by each other through formal and informal rules and norms, and has really generated some considerable insight into issues within sport and recreation. So getting into the concepts, organizational fields are understood as the institutional environments in which actors operate. So we conceptualized municipal recreation as an organizational field within municipal government, in the sense that it is a distinct domain within the larger domain of the government, consisting of organizations and actors involved in providing recreation opportunities to the community. Now, institutional logics are the dominant patterns of values, beliefs, and assumptions within an institutional environment, and are really the building blocks of decision-making and action. And legitimacy is the general perception that an organization or a set of practices are appropriate, reasonable, and socially acceptable. So for this research, we conducted a qualitative instrumental case study, and data were collected through a qualitative document analysis. 50 publicly available documents from municipalities in the Cochrane and Timiskaming districts were analyzed. And these documents included policy and strategic planning documents, mission statements, terms of reference for recreation committees, and newspaper articles. And to capture the institutional logics, data were analyzed using a deducing pattern approach. So looking at the case we used for the project, we examined a region in Northeastern Ontario consisting of the Cochrane and Timiskaming districts. Both districts are considered northern and are comprised of mainly small rural communities. Both districts report significant health challenges and poor health outcomes as compared to the rest of Ontario. And both districts are currently experiencing a push for population growth to address the population decline through programs such as the ARNIP program and the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So what did we discover? Overall, we identified that 3 logics of government, market, and community were present. Lower order themes were identified with each logic. A government logic refers to processes and practices through which state power is exercised and decisions are made within the political system. So therefore, municipal policy regarding recreation can be considered a decision made through a government logic. The market logic promotes individual freedom, competition, and the pursuit of profit. And a community logic values the participation of community members in decision-making and recognizes their role as active agents in shaping the direction and quality of life in their community. So looking at the core themes associated with each logic, we identified that municipal policies are required. There was a clear absence of policy regarding recreation service delivery. Official policies were extremely limited. Additionally, facilities were seen as the central component of service delivery. So recreation facility provision can be considered a form of government logic because it does reflect the government's broader role to provide essential services. And overwhelmingly, the documents demonstrated that facilities are the central component of recreation service delivery. For the market logic, the municipalities provided a minimal oversight or regulation for recreation service delivery. This laissez-faire or hands-off approach is consistent with the market logic. And reinforcing market logic principles were policies and statement that presented recreation as a means to achieve economic growth, and efficient service delivery was represented as a core policy objective. For the community logic, documents primarily emphasized a community development approach for recreation service delivery. They highlighted that municipalities do not take full responsibility for delivering recreation services and programs. So, for example, the City of Timmins Recreation Master Plan, developed in 2014, and which is currently being updated, stipulates at present the department is not recognized as a major recreational program provider in Timmins. However, it remains the key provider of publicly accessible recreation facilities in the community. Aquatics remain the only aspect of programming currently maintained by the City of Timmins. Additionally, the City of Timiskaming Shores Recreation Master Plan states, activity groups such as softball, figure skating, hockey, and soccer are skilled at delivering programs. However, they may struggle with administrative tasks. Inversely, the city is highly skilled at administrative technologies, but not well positioned to deliver programs. So our study reveals that these logics drive field level practices within municipal recreation in Northeastern Ontario. The documents analyzed often referred to all three logics simultaneously. However, we can see that the government and market logics often conflict with statements regarding community logic. Any mention of a community development approach for recreation service delivery was overshadowed by a lack of clarity and the hands-off approach regarding how the municipalities will facilitate and support this approach. Furthermore, these three logics define legitimate activities by key decision makers. Throughout the document analysis, it became apparent that although three logics were identified, text and practices cremating semantic and referential meaning with the principles of government and market logic appeared more frequently, suggesting these as dominant logics. So we suggest that the government and market logic informs the legitimacy of municipal government through economic efficiency and market-driven practices. The community logic informs the legitimacy of municipal recreation. So the community logic really aligns with the historical core beliefs of recreation by emphasizing social cohesion, accessibility, and quality of life. However, this research also suggests that community logic also acts as a filter for the legitimacy of the institution of municipal government. So here, community logic is instrumentalized to justify reductions in government spending on public services by promoting community-led initiatives as alternatives to direct service provision. So overall, our findings highlight that the logics underpinning decision-making in recreation service delivery inform the legitimacy of both municipal government and municipal recreation. So this is all important for rural communities because in areas reporting poor health outcomes, such as the Cochrane and Timiskaming Districts, using policy to address these disparities and create a supportive environment is particularly important to improve health outcomes and quality of life. And recreation does really play an important role in fostering healthy citizens in rural communities. And advocating for population growth necessitates that communities proactively expand and diversify their services to effectively meet the needs of an increasingly varied population. And in comparison to urban communities, rural communities have less access to resources to navigate through complex environments for service delivery. So what does all of this information mean? What can we as researchers take away from it? The research contributes to the theoretical discussion around what underpins decision-making in recreation service delivery in rural communities. And by identifying the specific logics at play, the research contributes to the broader discourse on policy formulation and implementation in public administration. It illustrates the complex interplay of diverse institutional logics within a single policy area. And the practical implications from this work require rural municipalities to rethink how multiple logics shape policy development and implementation in the field of municipal recreation. The identification of specific institutional logics as drivers of policy decisions equips policymakers and scholars with a more precise toolkit for predicting and analyzing policy outcomes. So before concluding, it is important to highlight the limitations of this study and suggest directions for future research. Due to the lack of available public documents, a smaller sample size of 50 was acquired. And future research could examine the notion that if the whole field of municipal recreation is experiencing the same pressures and is acting in ways that favor efficiencies and accountabilities, does that become the new normal? Is the new legitimate in recreation service delivery portraying community development while actually acting in ways that favor efficiencies and accountabilities? So in conclusion, we highlight a need for municipal recreation organizations to develop policy that is aligned with their respective municipal governments. So thank you, Miigwech, merci. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. And my references are available in my presentation. So thank you.